We're talking today with Don Bullard of Wilmington, North Carolina, and the interviewer is James Smithick of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so Don, gotta begin at the beginning. Where and when were you born?
Say that again?
Where and when were you born?
November 15th, 1948, Salisbury, Maryland.
Okay. Did you grow up in that area?
No. My dad, who just gotten out of World War II a couple years before, he was in the Navy, met my mother there in Pocomoke City. And so when I was a year old, we moved to Clarkton, North Carolina, which is where he was from. And then from Clarkton, I stayed there until I was 11 years old. Then I moved to Wilmington and stayed there ever since.
All right. And what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My dad was an insurance agent with State Farm Insurance. My mother was a housewife.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a manager for a long time, and he got tired of traveling around being a manager from Clarkton. So he decided to establish an agency in Wilmington, and we moved to Wilmington in 1959.
Okay. All right. And then when did you finish high school?
Graduated from New Hanover High School in New Hanover County, Wilmington, North Carolina, in 1967.
Okay. Now, of course, Vietnam was heating up while you were in high school. Were you paying attention to that?
I watched the news a little bit, but I wasn't that, focused on it, I might say, at that age.
Okay.
It was around the other side of the world. It wasn't that important to me.
All right. So what did you do after high school?
I worked construction for the summer, and at that point I saved my money and soloed in a fixed wing because I like the idea of flying.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started college, but only went for about 6 weeks at University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and decided I was not ready for college. I wanted to fly, so I interviewed with additional armed forces, and the Army was the only thing that would take me without a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I joined the program, and the Warrant Officer Flight Program.
All right. So when did you actually enlist?
I enlisted, I think, around August or September of '67, but I didn't actually go into basic training until December. They gave me about 90 days to kind of get things organized.
Okay. So where did you go for basic training?
Fort Polk, Louisiana. That's where anybody that was a warrant officer candidate went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training.
All right. And describe what that basic training was like.
Basic training in armies is the same for everybody. It doesn't matter what you're going to go do after that. You have to go through about 8 weeks of learning basics from how to march, how to clean, how to organize, how to shoot, anything that a soldier needs, basically. And like I said, it was an 8-week program. During that 8-week program, I caught a severe flu. Spent a week in the hospital, and I decided, you can't. If you missed more than 7 days of the basic training, you had to recycle and start over again. So by the 6th day, I was feeling a little better. The 7th day, I went ahead and checked myself out so I could get back in the program. I didn't want to go through it again.
All right. How easy or hard was it for you to adjust to the training?
It wasn't very hard for me. It was easier. The physical part was the hard part, but I was an ROTC in high school.
Okay.
I spent 3 years in ROTC, so I knew some basic things about the Army. I was on what's called a drill team. We would, march and throw the rifles up and catch them and do that sort of stuff, and marching parades and things like that. So I already had a lot of that basic training, which helped me knowing how to shine shoes and everything else. So that actually gave me a leg up over some of the other people that were in basic training with me.
Okay. Now, in basic, were you there with people who were going to have all different jobs, or did they put the warrant officer candidates together?
No, it was a mixed bag. It didn't matter what you were going to do afterwards. You were all basically organized by an alphabetical order, and that's how I met my two good friends. His name was Armstrong, his last name, and I've got the guy behind me was Carpenter, so we became 3 friends, A, B, and C.
Very good.
We're still friends.
All right. Were there people in basic who were having trouble or getting kicked out or washed out?
Yes, there was a lot of people who couldn't adjust to authority, who had no organizational skills, didn't have any hygiene skills. There were some very poor, and for lack of a better word, uneducated people that were struggling with small academics involved, but as well as just, personal hygiene and knowing how to take care of themselves and cleanliness.
So what happened to people when they screwed up?
Well, sometimes they were just given additional assignments, like put on KP or, cleaning the bathroom and that kind of stuff. Some of them worked their way through it. The Army wasn't really particular at that point because they needed bodies, and so a lot of people probably got through basic training that wouldn't in today's time.
Right.
It's just a matter of supply and demand, you might say.
Okay. So how long was basic?
8 weeks.
Okay. And where do you go next?
Went to Fort Walters, Texas, which is where all primary helicopters pilots went, which is in Mineral Wells, Texas.
Okay. And so what happens there?
Well, there it's pretty well strict. They, you're there for 5 months, and some physical conditioning, but also a lot of academics. You do that for a few weeks before you actually sit in the seat of a helicopter. What they failed to tell you, that if you flunked out of flight school, you automatically went to infantry. But once I found that out, it kind of incentivized me to not fail. But we lost 40% of our students due to either academics or not able to control the helicopter in the first 8 weeks, 40%. And that's pretty standard at that time.
Yeah.
You put a lot of bodies in there, some of them make it through, a lot of them get recycled. You go back to another class and see if you can catch up, and if you can't, then you basically wash out and end up in the infantry more likely.
All right. So what kind, how quickly do you start actually flying helicopters?
I can't remember exactly, but I would say it was somewhere around the 6-week point.
Okay. All right. And what kind of helicopter do you fly?
It was a variety of TH-55s, OH-13s, or OH-23s, and I flew the OH-23, which is a little bit heavier aircraft, actually quite a bit heavier than the TH-55 or the OH-23.
Okay. And what did the helicopter look like? Was it?
It had a long tail, and it was a bigger tail than the other aircraft, and a bubble on front.
So a little bit like the MASH helicopter.
Yeah, it was. The MASH helicopters were a lot of OH-13s, so it was a bigger version, and carried more weight. They usually put the bigger guys in the OH-23s. I was not a big guy, but I ended up in it.
Okay. And did people have accidents and things in training?
Oh yeah, there was always accidents. We didn't lose anybody, but we had a lot of people that had some minor skirmishes, you might say. There were no total aircraft in my class that crashed, but I know some of the adjoining classes that went through at the same time, because you hear things that's going on. Some people got lost and ran out of gas, and crashed. Some people ran into power lines and crashed,
Right. Now, when you're doing that training there, do they let you off base at all?
No, not for the first, I would say, 3 months, and then you maybe get a pass, a weekend pass or something like that.
And not a lot of places to go very close?
I go to Fort Worth.
Okay.
If you want to drive further enough, you go to Dallas. We went to Fort Worth, once I think. And I went to Dallas one time, but you didn't have a lot of money, I didn't have a lot of transportation, take the bus. So for the most part, you were 99% of your time on base.
Okay. Now, so after that, those 5 months, where do you go next?
You either went to Savannah, Georgia, or which is Hunter Stewart Army Base, or Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is where I went.
Okay. And what do you do at Fort Rucker?
At Fort Rucker, you're going into advanced helicopter school. You've already soloed. They know that you can control the aircraft, and then you transition from the little aircraft into a Huey. And so you're practicing on the Huey, and that's 4 months worth of that. You had to have 200 flight hours before you actually graduated from flight school. And so, you finished that, you learned to fly under the hood, which is IFR, Instrument Flight Regulations. You learn different tactics for different weight loads. You learn about density, altitude, what you can put on your aircraft based on what it can carry, as well as how hot, humid it is, and that sort of thing. They're preparing you for Vietnam at that point.
Okay. Now, so can you fly at night?
Yes, it's night flying.
Okay, and with the instrument flying, are you able to fly in cloud cover or?
Yes, when you're on instruments, it doesn't matter whether it's clouds or not. You know, now if it was 0-0, which means you can't see your hand in front of your face, they don't let you take off.
Yeah.
But if you had like at least 500 feet of ceiling where you could see below, they would let you take off and fly in the clouds.
Okay.
That was probably the most dangerous part because people get disoriented and lost and then panic. You know.
All right. So how long do you spend at Fort Rucker?
4 months.
Okay. And then when you complete that, do you get orders for Vietnam?
Yeah, 99% of our clients went to Vietnam. My friend Paul Armstrong, he ended up in Germany because his brother was in Vietnam at the time. But everybody else that I know of went straight to Vietnam.
Okay. And you were flying Hueys there?
I flew Hueys for, when I got to Vietnam first time in January of '69, they seemed to have an abundance of pilots. And so we weren't getting much flight time, but they needed Loach pilots, the light observation helicopter 086 Alpha. And so I was transitioning into that in a couple of months. So I flew Loaches for a while. Actually, and I was stationed in Chulai, which is in the southern I Corps. We were on the coast. We had hooches. We actually lived on the ocean. So I had an oceanfront property, you might say, which is nice because we had breezes and we had an officers club. We had hooch maids, which come in and clean for us and that sort of thing. Wasn't the worst place in the world to be assigned.
All right. I do want to back up. I was actually asking specifically, did you just train exclusively in Hueys when you were at Fort Rucker?
Yes.
Okay. So when you finished at Fort Rucker, and then do they give you leave home before you go overseas?
Yeah, 30 days.
Okay.
Right.
And then how do they get you to Vietnam?
I'm sorry?
How do they get you to Vietnam?
They flew commercial aircraft, you know, at that time. So they'd load, when I say commercial, they chartered the commercial aircraft. So everybody on board was Army or whatever, maybe Air Force. And you would fly out of either Seattle, Tacoma, or San Francisco.
And where did you fly out of?
First time San Francisco.
Okay. And did you stop anywhere along the way?
We stopped in Guam for a short period of time, and then on to Vietnam.
And where do you land in Vietnam?
Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, which is Saigon, basically.
Okay. And what happened? What's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
It's hot. Because they made you wear your Army greens as a warrant officer. So you had on this heavy wool uniform, and you step off the plane, and it was like you were going into an oven. It was extremely hot, and you were, you know, young still, you know, had just turned 20 years old. You know, I'm thinking they're gonna start martyring us when we first get off the aircraft. You sort of, you know, you want to keep your composure, but your senses are at a peak. You're thinking, what's going to happen next, you know? But we got off, you know, and got on a bus and went to the in-country orientation. Yeah.
All right. And what do you learn there?
Basically, you learn a few things about what you can do and can't do. They set you up in a barracks. They give you different uniforms for jungle wear and lighter wear for the conditions and that sort of thing. You know, as a pilot, they gave you additional equipment. You didn't get all of your equipment until you got assigned to a base. So.
All right. Now, when you got over there, did you have orders for a specific unit, or were you just going to get sent somewhere?
No, they signed me orders once I got there.
Okay. All right. And what unit were you assigned to?
Okay, it was assigned to A Company 123rd Aviation Battalion, Americal Division, and that was up in Chulai again, which is the coast of southern I Corps.
Right. It's an area that the Marines had started it, and the Army took it over.
That's right.
Right. Okay. And you get what kind of reception do you get when you go up and join the unit?
Well, you don't actually go directly to the unit. You go to an orientation center, you might say, and I stayed a few days there. In one instance, which was really sort of traumatic to me, you know, you got there, you were like you kind of taking it easy, and I went to had a couple of beers, and I go out to the huge communal shower they had at night. It was dark, you know, and I'm in this shower, and I'm lathered up, and we start taking incoming rockets. Well, I didn't know where a foxhole was or anything was, you know. So I'm thinking, this is my first, you know, experience in Vietnam. I'm gonna die with soap on me in the shower. And I could hear this thing getting closer and closer, so I got in the corner of the shower and got down just as small as I could make myself, you know, until it stopped. And I thought, well, welcome to Vietnam, you know. That was my first experience with mortars.
All right. Okay. And so then so you have an orientation course there?
Yeah, they taught you about the area you're in and what you do, you know, kind of just get you also climatized to the climate, you might say.
Yeah.
Give you a while to do that. And I think you're there like maybe just 2 days really. And then they assigned me to the A company, which was at the Kiha heliport, which is in the northern part of Chulai.
Okay. All right. And what kind of reception do you get when you join the unit?
Well, when I got there, they're always happy to see new pilots and that sort of thing. So they, you know, they assign you a hooch. You know, you get into the hooch and you're meeting the people that you're going to be residing with for some period of time. And it was all very friendly. You know, no hostility, no. You're all in the same situation. So it doesn't matter whether you came from a rich family or poor family or whatever. You all have gone through the same thing in flight school, so you've already built some bond. You know, you have a lot of commonality, and so you know it's pretty easy to fit right in.
Okay. And how quickly do you start flying?
I would say with probably 3 or 4 days, we flew a couple of missions. I remember, this is kind of funny. The first mission I flew, scared to death. You know, Peter pilot on the right hand side and aircraft command on the left, and we're going to fly out to this LZ, which was the Special Forces out in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, I'm thinking we're going to get shot at any time. And so I'm flying, they're flying in there, and I'm watching the pilot. He's got the controls, and I see these things zipping by the windows. And I thought, shit, we're getting shot at. But I'm looking up at this guy, and I'm thinking, he's not flinching a bit, you know? And I'm trying to get as small as I can behind the chicken plate because there's these things flying by. And I thought, man, this is the bravest guy I've ever seen. So we get on the ground, you know, we didn't take any hits. And I said, did you see those things flying by? He said, yeah, those bugs.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bunch of bugs. And I thought it was bullets. You know, right around, I was panicking, you know. But later on, I thought, you can't see a damn bullet to start with. But I thought it was funny. So I tell my friends about my first landing in Vietnam. I thought it was taking fire.
Right. All right. So there's a process here. Do you fly initially as sort of the co-pilot for a more experienced pilot?
Yeah.
And how long is it before you get to take the controls yourself?
It was about 4 months, you know. First off, I transitioned to loaches because they need loach pilots. Right. So I was flying what's called first light and last light. You go out before dawn to see if any mortars are going to get fired so you can try to locate them, or if you see anybody moving out towards a wire, which is the perimeter, and the same thing for the last light, you know, right at evening. But then I got assigned for about 30 days to the Marines because the Marines didn't have small helicopters, what we call little birds. So that was in Da Nang, and we were on the outer perimeter, the western perimeter of Da Nang, and I worked with the Marines flying people for forward air control and kind of scouting and doing last light and first light there. So that was kind of a 30-day thing. Some interesting experiences that happened there, though. We did find a couple of guys that weren't where they were supposed to be, and the captain, who was the senior officer on board, he wasn't a pilot, but he still had control of the aircraft because you were working for him, basically. And he, you know, blew those guys away. And they went back there later and found a large cache of weapons. But also one night they woke me up and said they needed a little bird to go out because the CH-46, which is the Marine version of Chinook, had crashed. And it had several aircraft get down in this area, so we located it. And I had to hover about 50 feet above this CH-46, which had crashed, while they were dragging out the bodies of the Marines. And it was like, you know, unreal because they were bringing these bodies out and every bone in their body was broken and they were like rag dolls, you know. They were just dragging out. It was about 20 Marines that were killed in that accident, you know. That was my first what I call real experience with seeing death, even though it wasn't a battlefield, but death of soldiers and that sort of thing. And that was done a long time impression with me.
To back up a little bit, in the first phase, before you went over to flying the small helicopters, were there particular events or things that stood out while you were doing the co-pilot thing in the Hueys?
Not particularly. You were enhancing your skills, and the aircraft commander, who was obviously senior, he would tell you what to do and what not to do, and you're still getting a feel of control.
Right.
You got through flight school, but that doesn't mean you're a great pilot.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time to learn, the procedures to fly exactly like you need to in any environmental condition, whether it's landing on a mountain or landing in the paddies or whatever. So you're building up your skills, your experience at that point.
Now, what was sort of the mission of the unit you were in? What was their job?
Well, it was two parts. Part of the company, the A company, was like just resupply. New soldiers would come in, we'd take them out to the field, or if they needed supplies, we'd take them out to the field. And the second part of the company was VIP. We flew the general, commanding general, and the deputy general. It's a 2-star and a 1-star, and any other VIPs. So I eventually became a VIP pilot, but that was, about 8 months into my tour.
All right. So we can find. So you start out with the Hueys, but you're not an aircraft commander.
Right.
And then you start flying small helicopters, and now you're doing that yourself?
Yeah, it's an aircraft. Loach only flies with one pilot.
One pilot, yeah.
Yeah. So, it doesn't take long to learn how to fly a Loach. It's like going from compare a Huey as a Cadillac and a Loach as a Ferrari. Okay. Much more maneuverable, much easier to fly. And so I love flying the Loach. But then they needed more Huey pilots, and I built up some hours, so they put me back into Hueys. I was only in Loaches for about 60 days.
Okay. All right. So now you go back again, and you're with the Hueys. Now, what's the time frame here? When did you get to Vietnam?
January '69.
Okay. And now, when you got there, was there a monsoon at some point in there? Or was that over, or?
It was over at that point. We had pretty good weather. The monsoons came along later. The biggest problem we had was we took rockets almost every night. Had a lot of incoming. And so I remember the first or second night I was there in our hooch with the guys, and rockets start coming in, and I run out towards the bunker and get in the bunker, and the bunker's crappy, and so it stops. But after a while, you kind of got used to it. So, after you've done that 5 or 6 times, disrupting your sleep and everything else, I just roll over and crawl under my bunk. Mm-hmm. And so unless your hooch took a direct hit, you were just as safe. It's probably just as dangerous to get out and try to run toward the bunker. You're more likely to get hit that way than you are. And we had a lot of close calls where it hit close enough to throw stuff up onto our ceiling, which was a tin roof, so you obviously could hear it pretty easily.
All right. Now, was this an area that had civilians around it?
No. Well, not where we were located.
Right.
On the western perimeter, there was a town, which I don't remember the name of the town actually, but it was a small little village, but it wasn't a whole lot there.
Okay. All right. So we kind of go forward in '69. So over the course of that tour, what particular events or things stand out for you, or what do you remember about being there?
Well, I enjoyed the camaraderie, for one thing. It's easy to build friendships with people like that. I enjoy going to the officers club and watching the movies at night. Getting a drink for 25 cents, that sort of thing. We used to make bets on how many times a movie was going to break at night, though, because it was all filmed back in those days, and it would break anywhere from 5 to 20 times during. So you'd take a 2-hour movie or an 1.5-hour movie. It would take you sometimes 3 hours to watch it. But and you had a lot of leisure time at the early part of my career there. You go down to the beach and you go swimming and that sort of thing. But as time went on, I got busier and busier. And I do remember flying probably in my 4th month there with a guy named Richard McKay. And he was obviously the aircraft commander, and I was a Peter pilot. They call him our co-pilot. And we had to go up to Tam Key to pick up a colonel there because there was a big force moving in. and they had located it. So we flew for 12 hours that day in command and control, and they killed, well, they said it was around 250 NVA that day, you know. And we were flying low, we were flying high, because wherever the colonel on board wanted to go to see what was going on so he could direct the troops. That was a pretty eventful day. And the pilot got the DFC that day, Distinguished Flying Cross, and I got the Air Medal with V that day for our participation in it.
Right. I mean, how risky was your job?
I didn't feel like it was that risky at that point. You know, I only took one bullet round, and we were flying 1,500, 2,000 feet, flying flat out of nowhere just on a resupply mission, and all of a sudden we heard this ping, and we thought, what was that? So when we get back to the base, we looked down, and there was a bullet hole. When the bottom of the aircraft came out, went out the top, about 3 feet behind my seat. But that was the only bullet hole I took in the entire time I was with the Americal Division. Mm-hmm. But I eventually, about the 7th or 8th month, transitioned into the VIP platoon because I built up my skills, and apparently they thought I was a decent pilot.
All right. And so now what is your job like?
Well, it was a lot of spit and polish on that because they expect you flying VIPs, you need to look the part. Mm-hmm. So you had to make sure you had a clean uniform, clean boots. You know, the aircraft were better. They got the newer aircraft, the more powerful aircraft, because you take a Huey, one Huey, well, I need to back up a little bit here too. About the 5th month, I became aircraft commander. Mm-hmm. And my 5th day of flying, I crashed on this mountaintop because they'd given me an aircraft that had a mechanical problem and they didn't realize it. And so I'm coming down and I'm landing on what's called Pineapple, LZ Pineapple, which is the highest mountain in our area, west of July, about 4,000 feet. And I'm coming in and I've committed to the landing, but they hadn't finished building the landing pad. It was only half built. There were a couple of guys over to the right-hand side here standing there because we were going to pick them up after we dropped off some guys and some supplies. And I had run out of power and I had no choice. I couldn't go around, didn't have enough power. I couldn't go right, which is where the flat ground was, because these guys were there and I would have chopped their heads off. So I crashed over to the left-hand side. We slid down the mountain, went inverted, slid 200 feet, and honest to God, saw my light flash in front of me. Mm-hmm. First time ever. And it was very emotional, but we stopped. It's emotional now when I'm talking about it, not so much then, it was more exciting. So we stopped upside down. I look over at the pilot guy. The guy's name was Bob Sharp. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah." And we climb out of the aircraft. There was 4 guys in the back. One guy got a bloody nose, didn't even break his nose. We all walked out of that thing. I mean, the hand of God. So we hiked our way up to the top of the hill, called for somebody to pick us up. They came down, they did a thorough investigation on it, and they found out the aircraft, it's a bleed band, which is supposed to close when you put power in, which gives the aircraft more power, and it was not working right. And so that night when I got back to the base and I was having dinner, Richard McKay, who had flown with us several times before, he was a senior pilot, came over and said, "Understand you crashed so-and-so aircraft?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Thank God." He said, "That was the biggest piece of shit we had on Air Force." He said, "Nobody got hurt." I said, "Nobody got hurt." So, great. Okay. So after that, they have to give me a check ride to make sure I'm still not going to panic or anything. Yeah. And I cleared that, and then went on to eventually fly VIPs a few months later.
All right.
The VIPs was a whole different ballgame. You had to go out to the general pad, the general's pad, VIP pad, and you would wait for the general to come on and he would tell you where to go that day. The good new part about it was you got to fly a lot, which I enjoyed doing. And you had a better aircraft. It was a lot more clean, that sort of thing. You got to fly in a whole area of the operation from Americal, from the top to the bottom. And the general liked to fly. General Ramsey was his name, Lloyd Ramsey. And we would fly every day, And so we get a break every now and then. And so I flew him until I got about my 10th month in Vietnam. they came to me and they said, we'll make you a deal. Be careful when the Army says we'll make you a deal, by the way, okay? And they said, if you want to re-up for 6 months, we will send you home for 30 days, bring you back, give you 2 R&Rs, and then you can get out of the Army. And I thought, that works for me. So I signed up for that, finished my couple of months, went home for 30 days, came back and was flying General Ramsey again, and this time as an aircraft commander, okay? And so then I flew General Ramsey, this would be from January when I came back for my second tour, you might say, or extended tour, until March. And I'd flown so many hours, the flight surgeon comes to me and says, hey, you're gonna have to take a break. You've flown too many hours, which I'd never heard of anybody flying too many hours, but apparently they had some rule that I'd never heard of. So I'd flown the General 50 days straight, okay? The day they made me stand down, a guy named Ron Franson took my place, good pilot. There was another senior pilot with him, and they went IFR in the clouds. And so Ron was flying, and they want to shoot a GCA, which is ground control operator. So you identify by pushing what's called ident on your aircraft, and the control tower picks you up because you bleep, big bleep on the screen. Well, somehow.
All right. So before the power supply interrupted you were talking about.
Yeah, I've flown too many hours, and so this friend of mine, Ron Franson, they assigned him to fly the General that day. And what basically happened was they were flying instruments because it was a cloudy day, and the GCA operator in the tower picked up the wrong aircraft to vector them in, and he vectored them into the side of the mountain.
Oh.
So they crashed in the side of the mountain. The other pilot, Steve Pike, at the last minute saw the trees, and he collared trees and pulled the cyclic back so they hit flat instead of flying straight into it. But they crashed, and we didn't know where they were. I mean, this guy was still following the other aircraft. He picked up the wrong one. Once they figured out what had happened, then they tried to figure out where to locate him. They finally figured out there was in this mountain somewhere, but they didn't know exactly. So they spent like 36 hours locating and getting these guys out, which is a real horrific story. My door gunner died, my crew chief died, there was a lieutenant colonel on board that was getting an introduction flight from the General, he died. The General had a compound fracture his arm, both pilots broke their backs, it was a mess, in getting them out and everything. But Ron Franson, I kept up with him, and I became executive of his estate actually. He died about 1.5 years ago in Columbia, the country. The whole story, I don't want to get into that.
Right.
But anyway, so after that, I didn't have a general to fly, so I started flying other missions and that sort of thing to finish out my tour.
Okay. Now, what besides the General, what other kinds of people did you fly around?
I flew a lot of dignitaries. I flew Secretary of the Army Stanley Reasoner a couple times. I flew General Abrams a couple times. He would come down and we'd fly around and do missions, that kind of stuff. I remember one time we were flying with a 4-star General Reasoner. He was a 4-star general, and it was a 4-star Vietnamese general on their work there, and a 1-star rated Marine general, and our two, we had like 12 stars. And here I am, 21 years old. I'm thinking, got 12 stars back here. These people must be crazy. But this was sort of a good story that ended well. I never had vertigo in my life. So we flown into this LZ west of July. The generals got out and do their thing, whatever they do. We get back on the aircraft and I take off, and I'm flying, and I get vertigo. And you feel like you're going one way when you're really not. And it kept going, and I was thinking, oh my God. And I fought myself to get back on the instruments, and to believe the instruments, don't believe your instincts. I was able to correct myself and continue the mission. And we got back to the base and landed. And this 1-star rated Marine Corps guy comes up to my door, and he opens my door, and he says, "You got vertigo back there, didn't you?" I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, good recovery. I think we was probably crapping in his pants back there. Because that's where a lot of people get vertigo and they can't recover and they crash. You know, it's just very simple.
Now, did you get politicians coming out?
Hmm?
Did you get politicians coming out, congressmen?
I never flew any congressmen. Flew George Jessel one time. He was the Toastmaster General of the United States at that time. But mostly they were Secretary of the Army and high-ranking military.
Yeah. Did you have any impression of General Abrams?
Didn't get to spend much time talking to him. But, you know, when General Abrams is around, everybody pays attention.
Yeah.
You know, overall, I think he was a good general. He did a good job, you know. But he was a no BS kind of guy,
Yeah.
you know. What he said went. You know, he would listen to you, but he'd make the decision himself.
All right. Okay, so is there any other kind of part of that first Vietnam tour that kind of stands out for you that you want to bring up?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Walt Seeger, was walking to the shower one night and got bit by a bamboo viper, which is a highly poisonous snake. So we got him up, took him over to the evac center, and he was there for 2 weeks dealing with the anti-serum. They got him back 2 weeks later. He has an allergic reaction to the anti-serum, and that almost killed him. So he was gone for another 2 weeks, you know. Then we had, you know, lots of incidences where people get overstressed and that sort of stuff, and bar fights and things like that, you know. And one guy got hepatitis C, so we all had to take the gamma globulin shot, which is the biggest needle I've ever seen. That wasn't a lot of fun. One night we had been partying, we come back to our hooch, and Walt Seeger, I can say his name now because he's deceased, went out back and decided he was going to fly a flare, and he didn't realize that the colonel was right standing outside the back of the hooch overlooking the bank to the ocean, and Walt set that off right behind the colonel. He almost jumped off into the water. The colonel comes in, we all come to attention. He's mad as a hornet, wants to know who did it. Nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. So he looked us all in the face and said, I need to know who did this, and nobody said anything. He finally leaves, you know, and nothing ever happened of it, but he gave us a good lecture about flying a flare in a war zone. Because we're right where the flight path was. That was, I thought we were all going to be decommissioned at that point. So halfway through that tour, the second tour, my first year, and then the second 6 months, they come back to me again and say, hey, how would you like a direct commission to first lieutenant and skip to the second lieutenant? And I thought, well, I don't have anything to do on the outside. I enjoy the flying, I enjoy the camaraderie. So I took that, but then that entails another 2-year commitment. Okay. So I took the direct commission to first lieutenant, finished up that tour without any major incidents, and then went back home to the officer basic course, which is a 90-day course. And then they were going to give me a rear echelon job, so I decided I enjoyed Vietnam. I enjoyed the flying, I enjoyed the camaraderie. I volunteered to go back to Vietnam. So went home on leave and came back in January of '71.
So where do you do the officer basic?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, and what was that course like?
It wasn't hard at all. It wasn't physical. It was more like learning a little bit of leadership and learning different types of armament. They take you through infantry, and they take you through engineering, and they take you through a lot of different things. They give you a brief touch on everything. It wasn't like a full officer course,
right?
You know,
Okay.
because you already had a lot of experience. You'd already been in wars and that sort of stuff.
All right.
But it was, you know, not enjoyable. And some of my friends who had already deroged out of Vietnam were stationed in Benning, so we got to see them again too.
Okay. All right. So when do you get back to Vietnam then?
I got back to Vietnam back in January of '71, and that's when they asked me if I wanted to go back where I was, which I knew the AO and the area of operation, as well as some people that I knew were still there. I said, no, let's try something different. So they assigned me to the 101st and to B Troop 2nd and 17th Cav at Camp Eagle. And I walk in there and they look over my profile and they say, we got a lot of hours. I said, yeah, I had about 1,600 hours at that point. They're used to getting fresh pilots that don't have any except flight school. And they said, well, your load's qualified. how would you like to be a scout pilot? And I thought, this sounds pretty good. But I didn't really know what a scout pilot was with the Cavalry at that point. So I ended up in the scout platoon, and that's when things got hairy. You know, I was there. First mission, you go out, they train you and that kind of stuff, but it seemed like every time you went out, someone was getting shot at or shot up or anything. It only took about 5 missions for them to release me on my own because I had a lot of flight experience. And so you would fly out to the Ashaw with 2 Cobras and a gunship at the top, and you were always getting shot at. I took more rounds in the first, 2 weeks there than I did the entire 18 months down in July.
Yeah.
Luck of the draw. So we lost half our pilots in the 6 months I was there. Hale, Robertson, and Urquhart. They were all flew too slow, and that's not what you want to do out there and survive. And they all were knocked out of the air by RPGs, exploded, didn't recover any of the bodies. And of course the gunners, the observer was killed with them. During that period of time, I did get a little break though. I went down to Vunk because out of my hours I went to, they wanted an instructor pilot because we lost our instructor pilot. So I went down to Vunk Town. I spent 2 weeks down there going through instructor pilot school, which is pretty rigorous, but it also was a great nightlife down there. Mm-hmm. It's like an R&R down there.
Yeah.
And while I was going on that, that's when Captain Urquhart got blown away. He had come in country after most of us, and he hadn't been flying in a long time. His skills weren't that great, in my opinion, and I never would have cleared him for landing. So I heard that we'd lost a pilot. When I get back to Camp Eagle, to Fubao, Bill Snyder, a good friend of mine, picked me up to fly me over to Camp Eagle, and I said, I heard we lost somebody. He said, yeah, Urquhart. And I said, who cleared him? He said, he cleared himself. Mm. But again, the people that went over there and hovered, you're just asking to die. Mm-hmm. And you've got a responsibility for the guy in back of you too. So, like I say, we lost our company commander, Captain Major Groff, got shot out of the sky, and he was quite high at that time, but it was a 23 millimeter from what we understood. Just blew him up, and that was a bad incident. We lost a lot of Huey pilots, gun pilots. We lost 22 pilots total in the time I was there in that 6 months. Whereas my first tour, we lost 2, and it was due to an accident.
Yeah. Now, were you involved in the Lamson 719 operation?
No, I was there during that, but our company was not involved in that. A company in C company, where Bravo company really wasn't.
Yeah, so you were just still doing the Ashaw?
We go to the Ashaw and try to find, enemy, and it wasn't hard to find them. They'd shoot at you all the time, and as soon as they shoot you, try to get away, and hopefully. And I got shot down once the week before I got shot up, in the same exact spot.
All right, I'm gonna have to. Okay, before our second interruption, we were talking about your time with the 101st Airborne, and now as a scout pilot rather than that. So,
like I say, we'd fly out to the Ashaw Valley and draw fire, basically. The Cobras would cover us, and then we'd rescue ships. If you got shot down, we would rescue you. But in scout pilots, if you ever look up Vietnam helicopter pilot's most dangerous mission, it will tell you a scout pilot was the most dangerous mission in Vietnam, mm-hmm. which I didn't realize at the time, because you were doing the same thing everybody else in your close-knit hooch was doing. Mm-hmm. But you lost a lot of pilots and a lot of crew members. But it was just part of the day's work, you might say.
How many of those missions do you think you flew?
During the 5 months I was actually flying them, I would probably say 200.
Okay.
You would fly sometimes once a day, sometimes twice a day, occasionally even 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. They weren't long missions. It took you about 45 minutes to get out to the Ashaw. Mm-hmm. You fly around for 30 to 45 minutes, and you have to go back and refuel and that sort of thing. But it was a very precarious assignment. Like I say, I got wounded on July 17th, I think it was 1971. I shot but the week before I'd gotten shot down in the same area, but I didn't get wounded. Mm-hmm. I hit up my hydraulics, and we had hydraulic fluid coming out, so we knew we were going to lose power pretty quick. So I managed to get to an old landing zone, an old airstrip out there actually, and they were able to, save me and my crew. But that particular day, I was flying in same area, same guy maybe, I don't know, and I took a bullet through the bottom, and it went through my leg here in the bottom and came out the top. A piece of shrapnel went in here, and a bullet, or it could be the same bullet, went through and shot my great toe, and my toe, looked down, my toe was hanging outside my boot. So flying along in this, all this happens, and I tell the guys, I'm hit, and I'm not sure how bad I'm hit or whether I'm going to bleed out or what, So I take my leg is like this, I can't move it, so I put it back on the pedal, and it falls over. It's totally useless, so it's like a piece of limp meat there. So I continued to fly, try to get out of the immediate area, but I wasn't sure how long I was going to be before I might pass out for lack of blood. So I flew maybe a mile, and I was able to land it on the road going through the middle of the Ashall Valley. And it's not easy to land with 1 foot. You can't hover with 1 foot. So I shot an approach right to the ground, and we were able to, I got out, going to try to see what I could do, and I fall over because I can't use his leg. My gunner comes out, our observer gunner comes out, and I put my arm around him. We start running away from the aircraft to get out of the immediate area. People start shooting at us from the grass. So making a command decision, turn around and go back the other way. We run past the aircraft, and the Cobras are coming in, putting down suppressive fire, trying to keep the enemy off of us at that time. And so the rescue ship was able to come down. I was lucky enough that there was an area close to us that he could land. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like forever, but it was probably only maybe 10 minutes. They were able to keep the enemy away from us. We hobbled over to the aircraft and got on board. And then the Cobras, this is a practice thing they do, they would come down and strafe the area while the other aircraft was taking off to try to keep the enemy from shooting it down. Once we got above 1,500 feet, as they say, that's where you're above ground fire, small arms fire. And this thing hadn't hurt at all at that point. Mm-hmm. As soon as I realized I was going to live, I thought, shit, this hurts. Mm-hmm. And so they get us back to the back center, and they don't want to give you any pain relief at that point because they're examining you. They tear up all your clothes, see if you got other bullet holes and that sort of thing they might not know. And so anyway, the next day I flew out of there down to Cameron Bay, and the next day flew to Yokota Air Force Base, spent 1 night there, which is the worst night of my life, because the guys come in and say, hey, Captain Bullard, we're going to have to change your bandage and it's going to hurt. And I'm thinking, I've been shot, how bad can it hurt? But I didn't realize they'd filleted basically a leg, and it was laid open, and they had packed all the skulls in it. And see, these guys hold my leg up, and they actually give me something to bite on, and they start pouring this saline solution in and ripping this gauze out. To this day, I've never experienced pain like that, okay? Anyway, so they bandaged me up again. Next day, go to Guam, spent several days, about a week and a half in Guam. And the doctor comes in and he says, we're going to take you to surgery. And I said, are you going to change the bandage again? And he said, yeah, but you're going to be out of it. I said, good. I didn't want to go through that again. And then I was transferred to Walmart Army Hospital in Fort Bragg, and stayed there about a week before I was able to walk on crutches and go home to Wilmington, which is about 90 miles away. And then I spent 9 months home convalescing. The Army was going to keep me, but they wanted to give me some kind of a desk job because they said I probably couldn't fly again. Yeah. And so I decided to go ahead and get out of the Army. They sewed my toe back on, and it doesn't have a joint, and it sticks out a little bit, but it works. The big toe is very important. Yeah. So that was kind of the end of my career as far as the Army goes at that point.
Okay. So while we still have a little bit of power here, if you look back at your time in the service, what do you think you took out of it, or what did you learn from it?
What say?
Well, you think back about the time your time in the service. What do you think you learned from it, or what did you take out of it?
Well, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I went through it. Even getting the shot part was not great, but it matured me a lot. you know, it made me into the man I am now, and I was able to move on and have a very successful career in the insurance business. I became the top State Farm agent in the United States in the mid-90s, okay? It gave me some drive, you might say, and some focus. The camaraderie we built up then, I'm here today with these guys, you know, that we built up over 50 years ago. You build up a bond serving in the military, in a war zone especially, that you don't get anywhere else in your life. You know, it's not like a golfing buddy, you know, you might go with that, but it's sharing the experiences, everybody doing the same thing, being on the same level, is a whole different ballgame. Except it was something that I'll always remember. I have some regrets, but for the most part, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
All right. Well, it makes for a very good story, so thank you very much for sharing it.
Thank you for having me.
All right.